Okay, and your hosts today are AK,
And Ivanna?
and today we have a special episode where we will talk about the full fourth chapter of Maneuvering Monday. So we have invited David Billouz to the studio, and David, you're an IT service management specialist helping organizations profit from different services, processes, and so on. Would you like to tell us a bit more about what it is that you do?
Oh, I would just add that, yes, during these different ranges of services I deliver to an organization, my aim is to really not focus on just part of IT service management. Is a very wide area. And that's all the reason why I'm here today is because we talk about people, we talk about, processes, we talk about technology, we talk about relationship with an ecosystem. And I think this is what can be interesting in the podcast.
Absolutely. And as AK mentioned, we are actually reviewing the entire chapter 4 today. So unlike other guests, you actually have quite a job with the next question, David. Could you tell us in your own words what happens in chapter 4 in case people missed it?
Okay, so in chapter 4, we have different episodes. The first episode called Skeleton and Some Corpse was about, in fact, on my mind, differentiating two things, introspection and retrospective. That's very important because many people don't see the difference between being agile as an organization and doing agile as an organization. So many organizations do agile. So at the end of a sprint, for instance, they conduct some retrospective. Here in this episode, there was they call it the museum. I think it was the name exactly helped me with that. It was the
Museum of Failure.
Yes. And the Museum for Failure is about introspection. It's about, okay, what I did wrong, okay, myself. And this is about being agile, being, doing retrospective based on, okay, collectively as a team, how we can improve. It's a retrospective. But the prerequisite for that is, first of all, to do your own introspection. If you don't do your own retrospection, you cannot do a group retrospective. That's the first episode. The second episode, which was about, the name of the episode was Yesterday's Board, is about the daily scrums, okay? And in fact, here, there was a bright idea that the daily scrum doesn't need any paperboard and everything can be done online.
You thought that was a bright idea?
Now, of course, it's ironical.
Yes.
My experience, when you have a daily scrum, is it needs to be physically. Just for one thing, when you have, just imagine that you have this daily stand-up and you have the team, around this board. Just the fact that you take this piece of paper with this, for instance, the ticket, and you move it from to do to in progress. Just the fact that you do that physically in front of your team means a lot for the rest of the team. If you do that in an online world, it lost a lot of information, okay? So I think it's very important, just a small anecdote about that. And of course, here, the strange thing is, what about Shane, this product owner? The product owner, we will talk about that later. We say that there are a lot of issues with the releases of the product. So what did the product owner do? Okay, so it was about that. It was mainly about the communication within the team, the use of online instead of, I would say, physical board for the team to conduct their daily scrums. So this is about this second episode. The next episode called Mutiny. I like that. If you don't know what mutiny is, just watch the movie called Bounty. You understand what mutiny means. And in the episode, it's about transparency. It's about transparency, which is one of the three pillars of Scrum. transparency. Mary, who is in the HR department, she wanted to be transparent. And she said, okay, transparent, we talk about the pay disparities. Okay, because she said it was a good idea. Let's be transparent. But being transparent doesn't mean you have to be naive. First thing. Being transparent needs that it is the last step in an analytical process. Why? Because being transparent is not to say, okay, Shane is taking twice as much money as the other people in the team, because that was what they described here. The problem was somewhere else. So in fact, they wanted to see why the engineering team doesn't work together, and they assume that the problem was in this pay disparity. So if you make a wrong diagnosis, transparency doesn't help. Okay? So transparency is important. It's one of the 3 pillars of Scrum: transparency, inspection, adaptation. But don't forget, transparency is used for inspection. Inspection in Agile is another word for analysis. So, and it can work the other way around. You analyze, you then adapt what you need to do, and you show the result in transparency. And that they did exactly the opposite way.
That's a great summary. And you have this unique perspective of actually being able to comment on a longer piece of the story. And I think it also shows that you can do deeper analysis when looking at a greater set of dynamics within this company. I kind of want to dive into some of the points you've already made. For example, the prerequisite of introspection for being able to do retrospectives. I think that's a very important point. From my experience, I've seen that in order to be agile in a company, a certain level of personal maturity is actually required from the people involved. I'm wondering, have you seen any good ways of addressing that in companies? How do you mature the people so that they can actually be agile?
Oh, yeah. First, it's a long process. So, as an external consultant, I don't always have the opportunity to last long in an organization. But when the possibility to do that, I can see some results. And to answer your question, I would say that you need to give people hope, perspectives. And I give you just one example, okay? An example is that, for instance, what you can do, if we just talk about Scrum, we can say, okay, sprints after sprints, you can, identify, that's what they call the ESVP. You may know the ESVP technique, you know it, no? ESVP. It means it's a technique to understand the behaviors of people in a retrospective. E means...
Tell us more. Yeah.
ESVP, you know it? Yes?
I don't.
Yeah.
Okay. So in fact, E like explorer, S like shopper, V like vacationer, and P like prisoner. And no.
That's a good way
to be serious, honestly. Yeah, and in fact, what you do with this technique is that they say, okay, you analyze. So in each retrospective, somebody else will do this analysis, and they will say, okay, the way Rosanna behaves in this meeting seems to me that she's a vacationer. So what it is, she's happy that the meeting is here because when she's in the meeting, she doesn't have to work. So the only goal is to stay the longest time in this meeting. The prisoner, exactly the opposite. He thinks that it's a complete loss of time to be here because he has some work to do. Okay? So he's a prisoner. He's there. He's forced to be there. Then you have the vacationer. The vacationer. You have the shopper. The shopper is the person, for instance, imagine in a team, is a developer, and from the retrospective, he just gets what can improve himself. A kind of selfish person, okay? A shopper. He gets what is important for himself to improve. And then you have the explorer. The explorer, out of his comfort zone, of his specialties, curious in a wide, I would say, healthy manner, okay, and wants to improve, to make people work better together, a kind of idealism. these people are good candidates to be Scrum Master. And what you can do is using this technique, you can, it change, the dynamic of group change. And then using that, and that's what I did. I said, okay, this guy, after 2 or 3 sprints, I think it could be a good idea to name it as a Scrum Master.
Mm-hmm.
And it really helped, because then when they saw that, the other says, oh yeah, how do you do that? And, they ask, and then they have the perspective, they have a hope that one day they can, become a Scrum Master and see all what the team does from a different perspective.
I like that it's emergent. You don't have a pre-described role. You kind of look at people in their natural habitat, and then you call out which roles they actually play.
And another thing which is important, and that's also one thing that we have in another episode that you have in chapter 4 called the prodigal son. Sorry for my English and my French accent, but I was born with that.
Perfect.
That is
My
allowed.
French accent, not with the English. Anyway,
we love accents.
So the prodigal son, yes. And in this episode, Jason, in fact, analyzed the situation. And when I say that, because when you analyze a situation, if you want to be objective by analyzing any situation, you need to be out of it. You need to be out of it. So any objectivation needs decentration. Any. Okay? So what I said that is that, for instance, I was invited many times when teams, just had a formal, let's say, retrospective with no action, they just spent 2 or 3 hours together. And in fact, the Scrum Master asked me, can I be the moderator of this retrospective? And I came, as an external person, okay? And it really helped people to understand, because they say, okay, we work with this Scrum Master for X sprints. We know what he wants. But when you are external, you come and you bring this decentration, this objective view on what you do. People, have a higher chance to take you seriously. Okay, so, and this is also about this episode on the prodigal son, Jason left the company and then he come back as a kind of hero because he left. So he comes, from an external view, and it really helps in having an objective view on what you do.
I think you're right. I think sometimes the system can get stuck, even though there are more maneuvers that you can do. It can be very hard to see them when you're part of the system. And I think also that happens to Marie once in a while, that she becomes a part of the problem and has a hard time figuring out how to start maneuvering to change the situation.
Yeah,
exactly.
Very true. Can I just ask one more question to this topic before we move on? Because now we talked a bit about this ESVP framework. What about the introspection part? Do you have any tricks to facilitate that? Like, how do you get people to look inward?
First thing what I would say that the thing that quite work well is if you have a kind of open retrospective, when everybody start in the retrospective by defining what we did well and so on, it's finished like, it end up many times like either nobody says anything, that's the worst scenario, or they started a big dispute. Yes. Why? Because they didn't make their introspection. And to answer your question, what happened is that what we did is when we had the retrospective, we say, okay, we have this retrospective next Friday. So what we did is that we had this paper where people had to add some notes, okay, about what we should do better, what helped us improving, and so on and so on. So their view on that. They had the possibility to do it fully anonymously. So anytime in the week, they came, like if you were in a voting for some elections, okay, they came anonymously, they put their stickers on the wall. By doing that, we increased dramatically the number of posts related to their own introspection versus the number of posts that was related to, finger pointing. I
You
could
should do
not do
differently.
that
Yeah.
because, you know, I always have the difficult task to do. This one, always this one, you know, finger point always has the simple one to do, and so on and so on. No, we had much more things about introspection. So anonymity increase introspection in that example.
Yeah, that's a good point. I recently actually did facilitate a big retrospective, and I wanted to capture this introspection part, but I didn't think about doing it like you just said. So instead, I had like towards the end of the session, I asked people to just take a moment to think about their own part, and I think it was good to have that as a topic. But I think it would have been more effect or like have a bigger effect if it was like the prerequisite or the outset of the meeting instead. So that's a really, really good point.
Another point that I can add, another technique that we used for retrospective is we said, okay, now in the retrospective, because, you know, I don't really like that, but many people say agile should be fun. Okay, I don't know. I don't really, you know, subscribe to this point of view. At the end of the day, my work is fun because I'm doing what I like, but not because I'm doing agile stuff. But anyway, said, okay, let's make fun. And the idea was also to increase the introspection bit in a retrospective. And what we did is that we say, okay, now we finished a sprint. The exercise I give you is the sprint, associate a name of a movie that characterizes sprint. Of Armageddon, Terminator, all this stuff.
Oh my God. Yes.
It was a catastrophe. So Armageddon. But how, in what sense this help in the introspection bit? Because people don't only have the title, like, you know, as I said, Armageddon, but they identify themselves to one of the character of this movie.
Interesting.
And it helps a lot in the introspection bit. It's another tip.
That is
a
fun,
good exercise.
Actually.
Yeah.
Fun and useful.
Okay. Was that another question, Aki?
No, I'm ready to. You can. Okay. I felt like you had a question before.
No, I'm just interested in diving into the stand-ups piece. Yes. What we know from the story is that once upon a time, these teams had actual whiteboards. They did their stand-ups at these whiteboards. They used to communicate with each other. And then the new VP of engineering started, and this practice died off. And instead, it's she's really trying to move the banner of efficiency, moved all the meetings online, and sometimes she even drops in on these meetings unannounced. And also, there are no scrum masters, so it's more of a self-organization situation. But also, that used to work because people used to know how to organize themselves, and now everything is in shambles. And I think it's you mentioned two interesting points. One was that there is something about the physicality of these events, and also where's the product owner in all of this. But maybe let's start with the physicality and the physical boards and this sad situation where we see all these dusty old boards that no one uses anymore.
Very important. Yes. Yeah. Are you still with me? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So the thing about the physicality, I think is very important. When we say now, no, in Scrum Guide now they say we talk about daily Scrum. Okay. Before we were talking about daily stand-up. It's another important nuance about physicality. Of course, you cannot stand up in front of your computer. You can, but everybody will say that you are mad. But in terms of physicality, the fact that you really stand up, that you stay max 15 minutes, it's also related to that exercise, okay? And when we said about, you know, this daily stand-up, now the daily Scrum, in fact, having, you know, showing to the others, I take this task and I feel confident to move it from 2D. Yeah, really. I feel confident. I show you that I can do that. I'm not an American fanatic but I can do that. Okay, so it is about this. Okay, and it is a lot about self-organization. It's about, okay, we believe you, we support you. But you took the decision to take this. You can say, okay, we can do that in an online space. It doesn't really have the same effect in an online space where everybody has some camera, some have their camera on, some are looking for Netflix in the same time as they have their daily scrum. That's the reality. I know what I'm talking about. Yeah, that's it. So you don't have this effect of having 6-10 pairs of eyes looking at you and seeing what you do. That's very important. And that's also why in many cases, people say that in Scrum, daily Scrum is one of the Scrum events, but in many cases, people call that ceremonies. It's a ceremony, okay. And another thing what is important in the daily Scrum, and I think that was also something that was surprising me in this episode, was, as I said, the role or the absence of role of the PO. Because, at the end of the day, we say, okay, they deliver a very bad, a poor quality of the new release, very poor quality, very vintage or retro interface. Can we blame the team for that? Do we have to blame? If we have to blame, we don't have to blame, but this is, I would say, the role of the product owner. Where are the representative of the users? We can talk to them about, okay, where do we have anything like that? Nothing in this episode was about this. It was just about, talking, and it was strange because Shane, who is the product owner, was previously a Scrum Master in another organization. So he should know perfectly, as a Scrum Master, what to do. And as a product owner, he should know where his role is in the organization, because one key thing is that the product owner should have a natural authority in the organization. Nobody should, everybody should respect it. And I don't have the feeling that Shane is so much respected. And that's also the reason why they say they have this parallel, channel of communication with people. You remember, I think it's Anne, the lady who left the company. She was doing this communication bridge between leadership and the team. So we are exactly in a situation where, because of what happened, this is they and us, the leadership and the team. And that's exactly what happened. Then you cannot do anything because people are not working together. People are working against.
Yeah, I think that's a really great perspective, and not something we've talked about before with the product owner role. So what would your advice be to Shane if he had to step up and do something differently?
First, I would say, okay, it's difficult to advise something when I don't have, as I said, all the context. But the first thing I would say is, okay, what prevents him to do his job? Okay, what prevents him? Let's focus on him, on product owner. So it means, okay, well, what? Because, it's not about daily Scrum. Product owner doesn't have to be in the daily Scrum. Daily Scrum is just a part of the story. But you have a lot of things that, we were just touching the backlog. Product owner is the owner of the backlog. Is the owner of the backlog. And if you are the owner of the backlog, you should see in your backlog that 90% of your backlog contains issues like that, contain negative feedback of the users of your product. Remember, in a product backlog, you have 4 things. You have the user stories, you have the technical stories, you have the improvement stories. So that means all that should be fixed for people to being happy or continuing being happy with your product. And you have the technical debt. Here you have a huge technical debt that will never be paid back. Why? So there is no pilot in this plane. the product owner doesn't own his product backlog. And if he doesn't own his product backlog, you cannot blame the team to work on it because the input is bad. So I would really advise him, bring users representative with you, talk to them, see what happens, discuss with them, prioritize, do your job of a product owner. And then we can discuss the second part, which will be how we help you implementing that. But it will also help the team being more motivated because they will see why they wake up every morning and go to work.
But also there are actual opportunities to talk to the users because we hear in the part of the chapter that parents and teachers are talking to our engineers at their schools and asking what happened with this release.
Yeah, exactly.
There are users that are willing to share.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that that's what you pointed in this episode, the lack of communication, not the lack of communication, but communication, it's a difficult part. So we know that we communicate all the time, but the thing is how we can really find the timely manner to communicate and the right channel to communicate. The fact that you have somebody helping, giving some information from leadership to the team is not the optimal way to do it.
I also want to touch upon Jenny in this situation, who is the VP of engineering, because I think that she is experiencing the same alienation as we see for Shane also. We have a conversation between her and Marie where she kind of tries to describe the pressures that she's under. I'm curious to hear if you've seen something similar in other organizations where the head of engineering is actually struggling to get a hand on engineering.
Oh, I didn't really had this. I had another thing that is maybe not exactly the same situation, but highly related. I give you one thing. I remember we had a Scrum team with a very strong technical lead. So he was not a VP of engineering, but he was a technical lead. And in fact, it was very difficult in this team for people to really work as a self-organized. Why? Because the person, in fact, it's not that he didn't believe in the other, is that he always think that he is the only person who can guarantee the quality of the software. And it means that in his case, he say, if I want to guarantee, I can't delegate. I have to do everything by myself. So once somebody wrote a piece of work, in the evening time, he reviewed that. Every day, every single day. So he spent a lot of time. So people were fully demotivated about that because they say, okay, I do something good, I do something bad, doesn't matter. At the end of the day, he will redo the job as he wants. Okay, so it was not like having somebody who, like Jenny, who is frustrated or who says, it was there was a kind of mea culpa or nobody likes me, this Calimero, yes. This Calimero stuff. Nobody likes me. I'm the the victims. No, but here there was a high lack of trust between this tech lead and the other part of the team. And how we solved this, because we had to solve it. It's not that we said, okay, the tech lead. So what we did is that, in fact, we say, okay, now what we will do is that we integrate in this software development lifecycle, in the activities, some code review. And we really did some pair review. So that means we had pairs, okay? And then the tech lead said, okay, first what we do is that we define some rules, some standards. And of course, we defined the standard that was standard in the market, but we said, this is you, the team leader who defined the standard. It was not fully true, but so, his ego was okay with that. And then we said, now that you define the standard, please let the other the possibility to see how good your standards are. So let's make them the peer review. And it worked. At the end of the day, he didn't bother with them with controlling what they did, but he was assured that the quality standard was his baby.
That makes sense. I've seen that situation many times where you have a very competent person who is the expert, and all work tends to gravitate towards that person, and taking away that quality stamp of the person who does everything better than anyone else is a hard thing to do, because it feels like you're punishing competence, which is not the case. But it's you have to get out of that situation, and if it arises, it's priority number one to diffuse that competence, because everyone else becomes more and more incompetent the more competent that one person becomes.
Mm.
And I like the way that you approach that.
This is very difficult, and honestly, in service management, and I don't want to name anybody here because I want to continue working at least 16 or 17 years. But you have also that, I don't know what is your view on that. I would also love to know your view on that. But arrogance is one of the most, I would say, expanded ever we have in our IT service management.
Mm.
Once people get a certification, they think that they know everything. And they start, in an arrogant way, explaining you how wise they are. No. You have to be humble. Humility is the key. Humility is the key. And if you have a tech lead saying, okay, I know everything better than you, no, for one obvious reason. You will always find somebody on earth that know more than you. Always.
Yeah, and I think it's also a matter of if we're oriented towards teams or individuals. So how do we reward individual results, or do we reward team results? Because it can also drive a very individualistic culture if we continue rewarding based on individual performance and not performance as a team and on business value delivery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that ties back to the whole pay disparity thing with Shane. Here we had an individual who we rewarded personally at a very much higher degree than the rest of the organization, which turned out to be demotivating for the rest of the organization too.
Yes, and even just in this chapter, we learned that he was actually relieved when when his salary was adjusted, which I think is very interesting, because it does sound like, now you also mentioned this, that he's not performing in his role, but I think he was certainly working under some really difficult conditions, because if the team didn't at all want to let him in or listen in any way, it's really difficult to succeed.
Yeah. And that's exactly, that's also one thing that we don't talk a lot about in agile, is this I don't know how you say that in English, but you can have this syndrome of having a team like if you had a group of wolves, or and this can be this can in some cases happen in organizations. So you have a group of wolves, okay? You have the chief, but they are wolves, so they hunt. So they don't do anything productive for the others, but they do anything productive for themselves. So if you let the wolves having this group, that's what happened now. That's what happened now with this, let's say, absence of daily scrum, okay, but with mainly the absence of the product owner having this, counterweight of what they do. Then you can build this kind of teams that, in fact, will just preserve themselves to survive, but they have no really constructive contribution to the other part. These people say to you, okay, they say in the episode to Mary that they of course they want to do, but honestly, if they know that the result is poor, and you don't have to be a high-level programmer to see that, they should do something with that. They should do something with that. especially if they know that the product owner doesn't do his job. At the end of the day, if they work for an organization, they should do something with that. So we are exactly in this situation, and I had it in an assignment not so long time ago, where we arrive in a team, and what they want is just to survive. They just want to survive. They just want to produce activities and just want to survive. The wolves.
Yeah.
But they don't produce anything. They are not builders. They are wolves.
And I think actually that is the case in Zebra apps, because I think it's not the first time we've heard of a senior manager who knows that what they do is not, like Jenny admits at some point, I know that it's not the solution to code, but I'm under so much pressure to deliver that I, she knows that it's not right to change the things that she did. And that reminded me of Mark also at one point saying, I know it was not the right thing to get the soda machines, but I just felt like I had to do something. So I do think that there is like this tendency of maybe they could be more brave and gain a lot from that.
Yeah, someone has to say the emperor is naked. What are we doing? Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
But that person was Anne, and that got her fired.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, I do have.
Honestly, you don't have a lot of brave people at work. Bravery is not something that is, that is something that is very common in many organizations. And people say, I don't have it in my job desk. So if somebody tells he doesn't have something in his job description, it's a real resistance to change. Be careful with that.
Yeah. But it's true, and I think this tendency of like looking at a team, are they trying to create value or are they trying to survive? I actually think most teams are just trying to survive, and that might explain many of the dynamics we're seeing in organizations in general. That it's self-preservation first, and then potentially value second.
Yeah, and also one thing that is important in just what you've said, and also that is not very clear also in the episode, maybe it's something, when we have a scrum team, it's like a rugby team. In a rugby team, why we talk about scrum? It's not because some in 1886 found that the concept is nice. Yes, it comes from 1986, the concept of scrums. If you don't know, it doesn't come from 1995, so it's quite a long time ago. And Scrum is about rugby. One big difference we have between rugby and other, let's say, games like football or others, is that in rugby, you have a place for any type of physical differences. So in rugby, you have big guys, you have tall guys, you have fat guys, you have small guys. In football, copy-paste, they are all the same.
Yeah.
In all the other sports, they all have the same appearance, all have the same morphology. In rugby, it's the only sport where you have all these differences. And nobody points it out. It's very important. So it means that in a Scrum team, you have place for everybody. And when we transpose that to a team, it means that a team, it's not a monolithic team of developer. You have developer, you have testers, you have analysts, you have architects. Okay, so you should have people who are the users advocates.
Yeah.
And these people should also help saying, okay, what you are now developing, honestly, it's like that. I will never use that. So it cannot be discovered at the end of a sprint.
Yeah. I love that description of the different kinds of people you have in a Scrum team. I think that that's very meaningful. It also made me think about one of the problems that we have with Shane is how to integrate into the team. And the teams in Zebra apps are very closed. They do not let newcomers in. They you kind of have to prove yourself that you're worthy of being a part of the team to get a say. And that might be the culture of the company. There may be histories, but it's also the culture of the teams, right? Because are you if you're focused on self-preservation, it may be very hard to let anyone else come in and disrupt and comment even on the ways that you work. I would be curious, how could you change that dynamic? How can you make teams more open?
I think that first, before I just answer the question, you said something interesting. Is it about the culture of the company or is it about the culture of the team? I think in that case, it's the culture of the team. I give you an example why. Because this organization, they have the culture of giving people a chance. They have two examples for that. Remember what Richard did. Richard took Willie as a janitor, and then, he made him evolve because he believed in Willie. And he did the same with Jack. Jack, or not the Jack, sorry, Frank. I think one of what
the CFO. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't remember all the names by heart. But the person who started as an accountant and then was a CFO. So in the culture of an organization, based on at least these two examples, we can say that people can get a chance to evolve. So it means that in that case, the real problem is this team itself. The fact that, in fact, as you said, they don't want to bring, and in fact, the only way you have to do that, and that's why I was surprised, because Shane is a Scrum Master, is to show that you cannot compete with the same arms with the team. So don't do that. I mean, you will lose the battle. The battle is, if you have a team of developers, don't try to persuade them that you are as good developer as they have. You already lost it.
Yeah.
Don't even try it. Okay? That's the main mistake people will do. Okay, he wants me to show that I am good. Okay, I will show him that I understand his work better than him, or at least at the same. No. Be a Scrum Master in that case. Be a Scrum Master. Explain, show what Scrum brings. Show him that he doesn't know anything about Scrum. Bring him in a situation where he has to be humble. In the Czech Republic, they say something, the country where I'm living, okay? They say, in front of anybody, never, put yourself in a pedestal, but never be beneath his level of eyes. Never. So never be worse or better than anybody, but show, your strengths. Everybody has some different strengths. And I think that would be the way to approach this team. You are good developers, but here we have to build a product. To build a product, there is a framework called Scrum. Let me explain you. Let's start it. Let's give it a chance. And I will help you.
I like that saying, that it's about being in eye level and not below, not above, but also showing your worth. But also that if that is how we would meet new people, is assuming that they are at eye level with us, not below, not above. Man, that would solve so many problems.
Well, I'm an utopist. I mean, I live in Czech Republic for 27 years, so.
But if I may also, this is not work related at all. But I just moved to the US, as everyone on this call, but also our listeners already know. And my kids started school here, and it's been a very interesting experience because when starting school in Copenhagen, in Denmark, there's always this period where you're kind of an outsider. Anyone new to a group, people just need to kind of gauge you, like, who are you? Let's see if you're a part of us or not. Whereas their experience of starting school in the US is that there's a lot of curiosity. Like they have just been like swarmed by their classmates with questions and people trying to get to know them. So I've also been wondering about this difference in approach. Do we assume that someone new is interesting and exciting and should definitely be a part of us, or do we assume that it's a stranger and we need to be careful? Just a small schoolyard reflection there.
But that's really interesting. Yeah.
I think that also in this in your episode and in this chapter we talk about this. We talk about the assumptions or the prejudice we have. How we have some preconception of people, okay? And I just give you one example. What is important to me is that, okay, for instance, it will never happen for the time being that people from Central Europe will be able to do any kind of big consulting deal. Never. Because it's like being the Polish plumber in France. If you are Polish, you are a plumber. That's the label they give you. You can do what you want. You can be the master of the master in, let's say, strategic consulting. They will not give you a chance.
Yeah.
Never. It will never happen. Okay. So, and in business, you have a lot of things like that. You know, you have a lot of prejudice, not only about, you know, who you are, but about also these kind of things, you know, the Eastern Bloc. Okay, we are in 2023. In France, when I say I live in Prague, oh, you live in the Eastern Bloc.
It's middle of Europe.
Sorry, but yeah, I'm not in the Eastern Bloc anymore. You know, I mean, I'm not a strong, okay, but it takes really time, you know, and the problem is not that it takes time; it's that there is no really. It's difficult as in culture. It's case by case. You know, you cannot change the culture. You can change individual behaviors, but maybe it comes. So what you said, you know, about this. The preconception or the assumption, and that's what you had in your episode. In your episode, for instance, they thought that Mary was perfect. How could she forget, you know, to pay, you know, this stuff for the anniversary? You remember this party?
Yeah.
So she seems to be perfect. No, she's not. She's a human being. She cannot be perfect. But
exactly.
Like that.
And I think in this chapter, we really do see how having all these assumptions can be very problematic, because it's only once we start to learn the reasons why people are acting as they are, and as you say, see that they're human and there's good reasons, that we can start to solve the problems. I think at least this is what happens in this chapter, that starts kind of loosening up all the tensions, and we start to understand why people are acting as they are. So I think that that actually ties into, I wanted to talk about what you said about transparency as one of the pillars of Scrum. So I think we should move to the mutiny part of the chapter, because we do need to soon start to wrap up. But I would like to cover that as well, because I liked what you said in your first summary of what happened, that Marie tried to be transparent, but in this case, it didn't work because it was the wrong diagnosis. Could you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah. So in fact, she was persuaded, wrong assumption. She was persuaded that the frustration of the team came from this pay disparity. So the fact that Shane had, and in fact, she thought that being transparent, as I said, could really help the situation. But and that's also what you have in different, you know, when we talk about transparency, it's about transparency is about trust. It's based on trust. Okay. And that's what people, you know, always forget. Don't be transparent just for the sake of being transparent, but being transparent, in fact, is a result or is a way to nurture trust. And the problem here, why she didn't have the good diagnosis? Because nobody trusts her, nobody give her the information for her to do the diagnosis. So in fact, if you associate transparency to trust, as you build trust by transparency and you have transparency, so we can trust you, then it can work. But by default, they don't trust her. Mark doesn't like her to talk directly to the CEO. Mark hides a lot of things to Mary, you know? And that's it. So she has no chance because of a lack of trust to do the right diagnosis. So transparency, trust have to work together. And that's the reason why she had the bad diagnosis. And I think the big mistake she did also is that, and that's also one she had in this episode, she really doesn't bother talking to the team members of the engineering. It's not like she came, and she just talked to Willie, but she should take more time to talk individual to, and she doesn't even know how their name was,
Yeah.
Ibrahim, remember that anecdote.
Mm.
So that's strange. Yeah. So if you want to do the diagnosis, transparency is also about observing directly. It's another thing which is important. If you want to be transparent, to make your diagnosis, make it without filters. Observe directly. So ask people what they think. Ask people what their pain is about. Start with that. Many people say, "Oh, I will not bother. I will assume." You assume, and then you fail. Ask. Observe directly. Ask.
Mm.
That's another part of the diagnosing, and that is related. If you ask, people will say, "Ah, she interested in me," and you start building trust. Otherwise, you will be like, "Oh, she's part of the leadership. We can't trust her." No. Observe directly, build trust, being transparent. All work together.
I think that's really interesting. And I would actually be curious, Ivanna, I think you're one of the most transparent leaders I know. Do you have any reflections on what David is saying?
Yeah, I am really reflecting on it because David, I usually say that I'm aggressively transparent, uh, and that's has its pros and it has its cons, because it does back to what we were talking about earlier about individual maturity, and the ability to interpret the information that is given, and being transparent also puts the responsibility on me to provide sufficient context for people to make the right conclusions about the information that is being shared. And I often find myself struggling with that balance because I do want to share sufficient information so people can make decisions on their own. Because if we don't share information, then we cannot expect people to self-organize, or that whole concept of pushing decision downwards, that can't happen if people don't have the information. On the other hand, um, it does require that I trust people first, and say, well, I'll share this information with you. You may misinterpret it. You may draw the wrong conclusions, but then kind of trust that we can clean that up afterwards, if people feel comfortable with asking questions and coming with frustrations, and kind of verifying that also. Um, but right now, I'm actually considering: am I too transparent? Like, is it the
I will say no. I think it's a great strategy. But I like your take on it, David.
Hmm.
That there are some other things that also needs to be in place for it to work.
I think that the other thing is also, when you have these three pillars, it's like they say in Scrum that this transparency, inspection, and adaptation. It's like when you have a device that show you the temperature in the room. Okay, so the device is transparently showing the temperature in the room. Inspection, you compare the temperature of the room with the temperature you feel cold, you feel hot, and so on and so on. And based on that, you adapt. So you add or you decrease the degrees in the room. And I think it's important. Why? Because in this example, when we say that we have transparency also leads to different source of interpretation. When they say inspection in this, you have this, but in fact, inspection is not having an analytic person saying, okay, it's 23 degrees in the room.
Mm.
I can read it. It's not inspection. What is interesting is 23 degrees. Whoa, I feel very hot.
Mm.
So for me, it's about 30. Or for me, it's about 18. I feel very cold, sorry. And this is about it. So when we talk about transparency also open, any open any type of interpretation of what you show, and you have to be ready for that. That is what is interesting in. That's why we don't talk about analysis. We talk about inspection, and we inspect from different views because it's based on your perception, on your feeling. Okay, and this is also another part which is not always fully understood. People say inspection equal analysis. Wrong. It's not about that. We are not robots. When we talk about transparency, yes, some of them react, as they reacted. Okay, I mean when there was this transparency bit about the pay disparity. But what is interesting is to see exactly how people react, and then you can adapt, but leave people the chance to react, and to react in some ways that you don't expect to react. That's also important in inspection. That's why a sprint review is rich. A sprint review, when you show what you did, you are proud of that, and people start bombarding you with criticism. Yes, why not? And it's not for the pleasure to criticize. It's because this guy will use your product. And you cannot upfront expect that everybody will say, yes, it's a perfect, product, and we will use that. We are not living in North Korea.
What do you think of the actual? No. What did you think of the reaction when Jenny shared that they evened out the pay? Just to refresh any memory, it was people started like shouting and throwing bottles, and leading up to that moment where Marie fainted. What did you make of that situation?
I think that's what I said. It was related. It is a real wolf group behavior. That's what I say. It's it. If you want things to improve, you have a constructive approach. Here, you throw bottles. You are just upset. That's it. So it's just showing that it's a real group of wolves. No, that's it. I mean, that's it. I remember when I started my career. In Renault, the car maker.
Oh yeah.
And I remember that that there was the CEO of this company, was in a plant explaining that they will have to close the plant, okay, because of restriction. A sad news, of course. And people was very upset, but people shouting at him saying that he looks like E.T. doesn't really help. It doesn't really help. You can insult, you can insult people, but it doesn't really help. It's just like the wolves who wants to survive. And if you jeopardize their survival instinct, they can be aggressive. That's just what I can say about their behavior. So it just showed this. It just showed that they need to, and I think that we may talk about what can be the next episode, but I think that there should be, maybe newcomers introduced step by step in this team. 1, 2 new people to try, because as I said, you cannot change this culture of the team, but what you can do is that you can influence individual behaviors. It takes time, but it's the only way to break this or to transform this wolf group into a team that works within the organization.
And in that case, maybe people leaving the company is not all bad. Sometimes having some free seats can allow you to introduce some new people, and then you can start changing things.
Yes, I think you're right. And it's always interesting also on my, for instance, I wanted to have more time and to do another assignment. So in the assignment I decided to reduce it, or nearly to quit the project where I was, okay, not suddenly. But people say, oh, you quit. And each time, even if it is your decision, people always see that so negatively. They say, oh, poor guy, they fire me. No, they don't fire me. And, when I smile and I say, yes, now I am starting a new assignment, they can't believe it. It's not the bad news, it's also a preconception of that. You leave a project, oh, they fire you, poor guys, and they start, they don't ask you anything, they don't talk to you, but all your colleagues talk about your case for many, many, many lunches, and you are, the star for at least 1 month. But in a fact that they just, that think that it's a bad news, even if it's your own decision. That's strange. That's strange.
Yeah, it should be normalized that you can move around. It's the 25-year employment cycle is no longer with us.
No,
Yes.
true. Yeah. I think we need to start wrapping up now. So like you've been warned, we would like to hear what you think happens in the next chapter, in chapter 5.
Oh, there is one important decision that Mary should take, which is, will she be the part-time coach for the engineering team to, let's say, change by themselves, or to suggest their change? And I'm pretty confident that she will take it, that she will do it. I don't know if Eric will replace her, but I'm pretty confident that she will work as a part-time coach.
Well, we'll have to see what happens in chapter 5. No spoilers. This was an absolute pleasure. I actually really like, this is the first time we discuss a chapter in this way, and I think that actually worked out very well. I think that we've been able to uncover some perspectives that we have not been able to in the individual sections. So thank you so much for partaking in this experiment with us.
I really, really, really thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here today. Thank you.
If our listeners have follow-up questions or want to learn more about you, where can they find you?
LinkedIn is the only, I would say, social media where I am active. So yeah, LinkedIn, that's it.
We will make sure to link to that in the show notes. Otherwise, thank you so much. This was great, and I would love to catch up with you after we release more chapters to hear what you think.
Yes, that will be my pleasure. But please limit the number of pages I have to read to 30.
Thank you.